The NHI free web-based training for concrete from Jason Dietz. Mr. Dietz has worked for the FHWA for 24 years.
I'm going to talk about training, and one of the efforts that was discussed earlier today during the state breakout is training. And I was asked to, and I appreciate the opportunity for the group to allow me to talk a little bit about this because I think it's important. We all talk a lot about the black stuff. What about the white stuff? We talk about the white stuff, everybody's like, oh, out the door. But again, we can preserve our investment by doing preservation treatments on the concrete materials as well. And that's what I'm going to reach out and talk about today. First, again, I can't say enough with everyday accounts for. Thomas, mentioned, funding is a big criteria. And we were very fortunate to have funding coming our way for pavement preservation. As he mentioned, as Sorensen left, there was 7-8 years we weren't doing too much with preservation. And as one of my roles as working for the Resource Center is going out technical assistance and technical transfer to state agencies. So if there's things I can do for your agency when it comes to these things, especially pavement preservation related, because that's my role, please reach out to me. But again, back to the objectives here, we really wanted to base this Everyday Counts initiative on state-based models and identify a rapidly deployed proven technology. And pavement preservation is already a proven technology, but yet underutilized innovations. Because there's things, if it's specification related, is it training, construction related issues, it's still underutilized innovation, and we really wanted to push out on Everyday Counts when and where to assist with this. When and where, when is at the right time and where is the right road? And these are the things that most agencies struggle with. And so that's the direction we went, as well as the how is to component to promote quality construction. And oftentimes when the projects failed, we never did them again. And again, that's why we're going back on the how to try to correct those actions. My emphasis here is on the web-based training. Everybody likes going to day-to-day trainings, but with our young millennials coming in, with people, they need some kind of web-based training they could do on their own time. And that's really our focus. And 4 or 5 years ago, Federal Highway worked with ISSA, and we created the preservation training for our asphalt pavements. Great course. I can't say enough. Get a chance, go to this website. It's excellent. It's not very long. People can take it on their own time, and it's a great source. A lot of innovations, a lot of photos. We spent a lot of time and money creating this course, so I really recommend it. But back to what I'm supposed to talk about, is the concrete. We went another direction. We wanted to go with more of an NHI type of training classes. And oftentimes the NHI courses, they cost money. But guess what? We're not charging anybody to take this training. Currently, right now, we're going through Adobe Connect issues because we're about 95% complete. As our software is not compatible with the person that constructed it, we're getting all those things taken care of. And hopefully, soon, this will be out for people to take. And again, free of charge. All you got to do is Google search NHI 134207. There may be A, B, C, D on the different things, but they're out there. And what will they cover? Partial depth patching, full depth repairs, diamond grinding and grooving, dowel bar retrofit and cross stitching, and joint sealing. Each one of these courses will be an hour and a half long. And they can take these courses, and they're very useful, very friendly. And not to mention, we're also working on a Spanish version for this, and this will be out here in the near future as well. So let's just take one of those. As you can see, partial depth patching. Let's go into it a little further. And here, a little bit of the first slide, once they get into this website, web-based training, and this is oftentimes when the person gets into it, this is what they'll see. And the first part is more of an introduction. It's a lesson, number 1, about partial depth. It's a little bit about the background. Why did we choose partial depth repairs? We want to make sure we're using the proper techniques and giving them the background of when to apply partial depths and why to use them on that particular distresses that we're having in our concretes. So that's a little introduction. Then we go into what is partial depth repairs. It's basically that technique to repair that top 1/3 inch of that concrete pavement. And then it goes in a little bit further. On what types of pavements can partial depth repairs be used? Well, they can be used on jointed, reinforced, or concrete overlays themselves. It's not specifically one or the other. For bare pavements, as well as ahead of diamond grinding techniques. Then we talk about the problems of partial depth repairs. Oftentimes, it's the incompressibles that get into those joints. The sand, the fine materials that get in kind of break up that materials, and that's why we have partial depth repairs. And as you can see here, this is each one of them that we talk about within this first course. We talk about joint spalls, then we talk about crack spalls, corner spalls, surface spalls, cray ball voids, and silver spalls. Who would have thought there's so many differences? But we cover each one of them. We talk about best practices for each. In addition, the types of problems partial depth repairs can address effectively. For those inspectors that may or may not know this, do we need to do any partial depth repairs when it comes to ASR issues? Probably not a good candidate. As well as decracking, and not to mention deep spalls. If we got something that's going down enough of that concrete surface, probably not a good candidate to choose. As well as the inspector and working with the contractor. You know, we talked about earlier today about quality. This is the first phase where we really emphasize quality into a particular project by the engineer working with the contractor at the beginning, looking at excess and deterioration. Best engineer can identify the repair types, but it takes that workability to work with the contractor to itemize what specifically will this partial depth repair fix and what won't. Correct the assessment procedure considerations, going beyond deterioration, as well as going out and take a core on top of that crack to see if it's coming from the top or from the bottom down. And that's the things we want to look into in repairing those distresses. Next, we have a little bit of scenarios. We have a little skids for the millennials. For this particular one, we have an inspector called Martin. He's going out there and he's going to look at these balls and looks at these corner breaks. And we give an opportunity for the inspector to choose. What are the best candidates for partial depth repairs? And then we give them a chance to choose. And if you're playing along with this game show, you would see number 4 and 6 wouldn't be the most appropriate ones to do partial depths. In review and discussions with project inspection checks with the agencies, understanding that inspector prior to going out to them, knowing what they need to understand before the work gets done. Very important. Oftentimes we know they're going from one project to another, but understanding why they're going out and doing this is most important. Having good project experience as well. Knowing that the partial depth repairs are durable and perform well in a long-term strategy. Then the agency, what is their value? Well, their value is to adhere to those materials and the equipment procedures. It's in their specifications, and that's what we talk about as well. And then measuring that quality indicators. What tests are they going to go into to validate that materials that are going to be used for those partial depth repairs? Things to consider. As you're taking along these lessons and you're learning, you'll see 3 icons up on the top right-hand corner talking about resource, glossary, and help. The resource, there's documents that the person can go into for further details on a specific item. It'll talk more about it, as well as glossary of period terms. Again, then on the bottom, they'll see a paper clip. And oftentimes, as you'll see in a few of these other slides that I have, for this particular one in orange, it'll be a PDF checklist available for further information for the inspector to know further information. So again, very useful tool. Personal protective devices. Safety, safety, safety. We can't say enough. We're getting a lot of issues out there about workmanship with the traveling public. We want to make sure everybody's protected well. And then when we're talking about especially concrete, what about those silica fumes, all those other things that are going to come up in the air? We want to make sure that we talk about the APF number 10 masks that their people are using. Nighttime construction, making sure they use the proper vest. We have 4 or 5 slides that go into more detail about that. It aligns those inspectors to be well qualified when it comes to each one of those. So again, you don't compromise your health and safety. That's very important. And we talk about on each one of these preservation treatments, we talk about that. Very important. As well as what do we do if the boundaries of the mark are incorrect on the job quantities do not match? Well, oftentimes, early on in the projects, we all mark them out, but then what happens during construction? They modify a little bit, they change a little bit, but they're never consistent. Well, here in this section, we talk a little bit about it and how properly to mark it off. Suggest walk through with the engineer to reassess what those conditions are, as well as make note, the project as it built drawings, our areas have changed. Want to make sure, so we take it back to those designers so they understand what maybe they can do next time when it comes out to do one of these projects. And lastly, if work has started, we want to stop and discuss the situation with the supervisor of the contractor, talk to them a little bit about it, and then get some kind of approval before adjusting. This is lesson 4 of identifying and marking the repair boundaries. Next, in lesson 5, we talk about the options for concrete removal. There's 3 different types that are often used: the concrete saw, jackhammer, and small milling machines. Very critical. We go in depth on each one of them, and very helpful. In lesson number 6, we prepare and repair those areas for concrete removal. First thing, we want to make sure we go out there and sweep them correctly. Then after that, we do some kind of sandblasting or water blasting. Oftentimes, water blasting is probably the most appropriate, and the reasons behind that is less environmental dust and things like that. So we go into detail, we talk about that, proper equipment, proper handling, doing things like that. Lesson number 7, select and handling the repair materials. First thing we talk about is the patching materials. Probably the most important. That doesn't get enough information, doesn't get enough emphasis. Next comes the bonding agent. Depending upon the material that's used, it's often sometimes used, sometimes not. But again, how does one go about selecting what type of bonding agent? Well, we talk about it. Also then, we go into the compression relief materials, the curing compounds, and lastly, look at the joint sealing materials. Next, we talk about the compression relief. Oftentimes, when we had failures with concretes on the longitudinal joints, compressions was the main factor of reasons why the partial depths were the problems. However, now we have some compression relief techniques, standards that inspectors can use to assist them in that effort. And then in addition, we go beyond that. We talk about ways to improve it in the web-based training. Then the next steps on placing repair materials is the completing of the patch. And as you can follow along, step 1, applying the bonding agent. Number 2, place the consolidated repair materials. Number 3, finish, texture, and cure. And lastly, seal the joint crack. Pretty straightforward. We go in depth on each one of them. And as you can see, the little boxes on the bottom, back, and next just would be like if you're taking the web-based training right now. The importance of the quality checks. We want to make sure it's done correctly, done properly. And then with that, we're going to get better performance in the long run, and everybody's going to be happy. In addition, lesson 10, we look at quality control, opening the traffic. And the emphasis, again, as we start early on, is making sure we had the quality that's needed early in the process. We talk a little bit about who's responsible for quality control, as well as quality assurance. And for the agency, you want, as the quality assurance, inspect during construction and have some kind of testing that validates they're within compliance. Here are some resources where you can go for further information. And then in addition, there's a federal aid essential video that's used on concrete pavements preservation. It's a short 7-8 minute video that kind of helps improve, also communicates the effort of what we're trying to get out of this. A little bit earlier today, I heard some issues with ADA. I often recommend folks go to this site, Department of Justice, give us the opportunity to move this effort. Well, we're not sure if we're all happy with their outcomes of how they did it, but in addition, well, these are the requirements. We got to do our leisure to correct them and fix them as best as possible. But if you have any questions, I really recommend going to the site. It provides a lot of useful information for an agency, what they need to do about a transition plan, and et cetera, et cetera.
What was the target date for the release of that webinar? Is that a TBD kind of thing?
No, you go into web-based and you go to the NHI's site. I'm hoping within the next month it'll be available.
Okay.
And again, you're going to go in there, they're going to ask you, hopefully not ask everything about you, your name, where you work, some phone numbers, and this and that. And then you'll get access, and then they'll send you a site where you can go to watch it, and then away you go. So it should be pretty straightforward. Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.